Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm delighted today to have with us James Hobson. James is the CEO of Attune Insurance over in New York. James, thanks for joining me.
David, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, look, I'd love to hear your story, James. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about who you are and tell us a little bit about Attune Insurance, if that's okay?
That sounds great. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO here at Attune. We are about 2.5 years into our journey here at Attune, and our focus is on simplifying how small businesses get the insurance they need. We do that today by offering 3 products to businesses. We sell through insurance brokers, and we've built a platform that basically takes all the friction and the work out of the process. So there's not a lot of information collecting between the broker and the small business owner. Our platform and our technology does that. In about 5 minutes, we can deliver bindable quotes. We offer a business owner's policy, which is a bundle of general liability and property insurance, a follow form excess policy, and then also workers' comp. So all that takes about 5 minutes, and then we're just continue to focus on adding to that product portfolio so we can serve more needs of small businesses across the U.S. And continue to improve that experience that business and broker has when their insurance needs come up. So that's what we're about at Attune. My background, this is really kind of my 3rd or 4th startup, depending upon the size of startups, but was very fortunate after an early career in finance and consulting to back in 2007 join a friend as we started a company called buyyourfriendadrink.com. That was really the name of the company, and that was really what I had to tell my wife I was leaving my job for. That's probably a different discussion as we were about to have our first child. But have been fortunate that set me on the path of really being able to build companies, think about how technology, data, and analytics can improve experiences. And most recently, before Attune, I spent about 6 years at a company called On Deck here in New York, where we took on a similar challenge of how to improve the small business lending experience, and was very fortunate to be part of that team as we were able to build that platform and grow that company.
Fantastic. And James, I'm glad you mentioned that business as the Buy Your Friend a Drink. I was going to bring that up, so we will come back to that because I'd love to hear the story, especially as an entrepreneur. And I know you've got, as you said earlier, you've got about 80 people, I think, in the business. You work with over 46 states in the US. And I think your customer base is what, sort of 1 to 10 million revenue? Is that the kind of US dollar mark?
Yep, that's right. We do. That's our focus. We do a lot for small businesses that are sub $1 million. And you know, the great thing about technology is when you build a platform the right way, we can automate a minimum premium policy, and we can also automate the way that we make the decision on $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 premium policies. So, but our focus is really on that core Main Street small business that you find all across the country.
Great. And you know what, obviously that industry is changing so quickly, and as you say, technology is coming through. There's a lot of incumbent suppliers who perhaps haven't adapted so quickly. What are the brokers crying out for that kind of your technology delivers?
Well, I think ultimately the brokers are a really important part of the process in that we did a bunch of research with small business owners to try to understand what is a great experience, and we found that they really want advice. And so we then started talking to brokers, and what they want is they want a platform that can help them serve their customers better. So as I said, instead of going to them and saying, hey, we need to get a bunch of questions answered, or we need you to fill out these forms, we want to transform that conversation so our platform really only needs a few inputs. And then hopefully we can enable them to have a conversation, which is about what are your insurance needs and how should you be thinking about the right levels of coverage for your specific business and, quite frankly, your specific risk appetite as a business owner. And so I think it's really technology can be a great enabler for the experience that a broker and a business owner has.
Fantastic. And I've got one more question I'm just going to ask you on that. You said 46 states. What's the most difficult and complex state for insurance products, and why is that?
That is a question that could probably take up this whole podcast. So I think that certain states are more challenging than others, and it depends on the types of products you have. The reason why we're not in all states today with our bot product is just some require the AG or paper to be 3 years old. And so since we've been partnering with a carrier, Blackboard, who's part of AIG, who was writing on new paper, we're just waiting for the paper to hit that 3-year mark, and then we can be in all 50 states with our bot product.
Fantastic. Well, you're not far away from that, I think. So hopefully next year, I think, actually, isn't it?
It's on the roadmap.
Fantastic. Right, James, we're going to jump into these questions, so thanks for that. Can you share with our listeners then what a typical day in the business looks like for you?
Yeah, great question. I think, my first thought on this was there's no typical day, but the reality is the way that I try to approach it is half my day is pretty structured and regimented, and that comes from my belief that great companies execute exceptionally well, regardless of whether or not you have the best strategy or you just have a good strategy. If you don't execute exceptionally well on a day-to-day basis, I don't think you can build a great company. And so half my day is really structured around meetings with various teams, various members of the leadership team, and it's really focused on execution, which is we have 6-month goals that we can break down into what we need to achieve every month. And those conversations are around how are we doing against these goals, where are we maybe having some challenges where something's turning out to be harder than we thought it was going to be. And then when you have a challenge like that, you have to kind of reprioritize. Or you have to go get additional resources, or you have to just sort of say something is going to take longer than we might have expected, because I don't believe you want to sacrifice on the quality of the solution that you're trying to build or bring to market. And so those are those conversations, maybe sitting down with our care team or our sales team to really hear about feedback, what's going on with brokers and customers on a day-to-day basis. Can be sessions with our technology team as we think about new tests that we're running. So that half of my day is pretty structured. And then I would say the other half is very unstructured, and that probably takes more of an external focus. And that's really around where are there opportunities in the market for us? How can I interact with people that I can learn from that might help shape the direction that we're taking? I deal a lot, obviously, with our investors and making sure that they're comfortable with the decisions we're making, the pace at which we're growing. So that part of the day is really focused probably more externally and really varies on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
Fantastic. Now, who through your business journey so far has perhaps had an impact on you as a leader, and how have they impacted your life?
Yeah, this was a great question. Two people really came to mind that have stuck out, and I think it's one of those things that I would preface to say that I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of people, come across a lot of people in my life who took interest in me, who cared about me, and helped me along the way. But two things that have always stuck with me was something first that was told to me about my father, who was a tennis player and then taught tennis, and then later in life became a real estate broker. So not exactly a straight line career. But I was interning where he worked one summer, and when I was in high school, and somebody asked me a question that said, "Do you know why your dad's a good real estate broker?" Of which, of course, I thought I had a perfect answer and rambled off something that was totally wrong. And it basically came down to he's honest, and people respect that, and he will tell people things that they don't want to hear, and that's always stuck with me. And similarly, in my second job, I worked in the M&A group at AT&T in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the telecom world and AT&T in particular were going through some pretty extreme highs and lows and challenges. And there was a gentleman named Ray Ligori who ran the M&A group, who is now a good friend and has mentored me for a long time. But he used to tell anyone who joined the M&A group at AT&T on kind of, it may have been your first day or your first few days, which was two things. One, he told us that if we ever made a mistake and when we were doing valuation models or working on a deal, that he would have our backs, no questions asked. And then the second thing he told us is if we ever traded on any of the information or we leaked any information to the press because we thought that would be cool, he would be the one to show us the door. And the underlying theme there was you can never trade on your integrity, and you need to make sure that extends not just to yourself, but every person who worked for Ray knew that he had our back no matter what, and we were in some pretty high pressure situations. And so both of those lessons have really sort of stuck with me, and I've tried to make sure that I've always remembered both those.
Fantastic, and good to have a lifelong friend like that as well. What do you do from the top then to keep your team engaged?
So I think great question, and again, this probably could be a full podcast, but I think for me there's really two very important things, and the first thing is it starts when we interview people, which is, are you excited about our mission at Attune? We obviously are, and I think it's really a blend of how we can bring people with technology and growth backgrounds together with people with insurance backgrounds, and try to create a new, better solution. But it's really important that mission of how we can simplify insurance for small business really is exciting and resonates with people, because oftentimes people might want to join a growing startup or get excited about fintech because at some point fintech became cool. But that's not enough. They really have to believe in our mission. So that's one. And then I think once you get here, I think there's three things that are foundational to people really enjoying coming to work. And the first is, when you walk through the doors, can you be yourself? I've just had experiences and seen too often that when people show up at work, they try to be somebody that they think is going to be successful, or that they think that their manager wants to see. And ultimately, that's a pretty uncomfortable spot. So, we hire people because of who they are, and we want them to be themselves when they come here. One of our core values that we have is, we call it no costumes. And it really is around whatever makes you unique. We want you to bring that into your work. We want you to bring it here, and we want you to help build Attune with exactly who you are. So that's point one. Point two is, do you feel every day that you can have an impact? And so I try to make sure that everyone understands, hey, this is where we're headed. These are our 6-month goals. This is where we want to be in 12 to 18 months. And then I try to make sure they understand the only way we're going to get there is if they try new things, if they take some risks, if they're willing to learn from their mistakes, if they're really focused on every day trying to do something that will make one of our customers' lives easier, better, to delight them. And so if they can take on that ownership and feel like they can really have that impact, I think that's really core to enjoying your job. And then lastly, if you're going to ask somebody to really challenge themselves and help you build something, they do have to be fairly rewarded. And I think that's both on an individual basis and collectively as a team. So things that we do here are, every employee has equity. We try to make sure that as we hit our goals, so as I mentioned, we have 6-month goals, that if we have a good 6 months, we're adding a benefit. So we've been able to add tuition reimbursement. We've been able to add gym membership, class passes. So we're always trying to make sure that everybody feels valued and they feel and understand how important they are to our mission.
Fantastic. And I know your office location is right down by the Charging Bull, isn't it? Down there, down there close to the New York Stock Exchange. And I think you probably obviously got the Battery Park to have a little run around in at lunchtime, maybe.
It is. It's a great, this has been my first time downtown, and I gotta be honest, I love it. It's very easy to get to, lots of stuff to do, and everyone on the team really enjoys the location.
What do you think, James, is the biggest challenge facing business leaders in today's market?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one where I really was trying to wish I had something profound to say. So I think it comes back to a little bit about the point of your own integrity. I think that the biggest challenge we have is, as leaders, we have a responsibility that goes beyond our results. And what that means to me is the how we do it is as important, if not more important, than the what we do or what we accomplish. And I thought back to a Charles Barkley saying where he said, "I'm not a role model." I think if you're a business leader, you are a role model, and that's part of the job, and we've all signed up for it. And for me, honestly, that's on a pretty small scale, but I do need to take on that responsibility, even if it's only within Attune. And so I think that we have to make sure that we are being role models, that we are, from a behavior, from a respect, from an inclusion perspective, we're doing everything we can to set an example that we would want our own children or anyone else to strive to. So I think that's gotten lost a little bit. And I think as pressure for growth, results, economic return intensifies, you can maybe justify or try to justify the how not being as important. But I just think that we have a real responsibility to try to set good examples every day, and I wish that everyone embraced that maybe a little bit more.
Brilliant. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Well, so this one was easy. I was very fortunate when I was in business school to be able to take Clay Christensen's class on innovation and his theories of disruption. And so I think that his overall theory of disruption is probably more well known, but the thing that had a profound impact for me was he also has a concept of this notion that companies are hired to do specific jobs. And it's in his second book, The Innovator's Solution, that he talks about this notion of jobs to be done. And it really challenged the way I think, because these jobs are not obvious. And you have to really think about the customer experience and the value that somebody is looking for in an interaction with a product or a company. And when you deeply focus on that, sometimes some pretty interesting things come about. So, the things that we think about here at Attune is our job to provide insurance? Is it that insurance policy? That's the output of what we do. When someone interacts with Attune, and if it's successful, hopefully for us and for the broker and the business owner, at the end of the day, we've produced an insurance policy. But I'm not sure that that's the job that we're being hired for. I think we're being hired for something different. We're being hired for the experience around that insurance policy and what they have to do in that interaction. And so it's a really great way to think about things. And if you haven't read one of Clay's books, I suggest that everybody read it. And it's something that every employee gets here on day one as a gift.
And what's it called again?
So the book that we give out is called The Innovator's Solution. That was the second book. The first book is called The Innovator's Dilemma, and both of them are awesome.
Fantastic. Now that leads in nicely to my next question. You talked about that experience for your customers, but what's really exciting you in your industry right now?
Well, I think it's been a really interesting journey. I'm a little over 2 years into insurance, and still have a lot to learn. But I think that it's a really great industry, and I think it starts with the product, which is, if you think about what insurance is we're sort of selling the promise to be there for you if something goes wrong. And you just think about how important that is, especially for a small business, where our job in essence is, if they need us, is to help them get back in business. And you think about how small businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy. And if a small business shuts down, it not only impacts the business owner and their families, but it also impacts their employees. So I think that we have a really, really important role to play as an industry, especially for small businesses. And then I think the exciting thing is if you start with that as a foundation, and you just realize how much opportunity there is, because The use of technology and data in insurance is not new. There's been a lot of things that have been going on from a risk modeling perspective, from a process perspective. But I think that the shift that's happening right now that's really exciting is a shift to the customer experience, which we talked about a little bit. And so I think it's from that perspective, we try to think about not just making that experience better or easier, but where do we have the opportunity to sort of bring the wow factor and bring in learnings from maybe the consumer world and really sort of not just improve but transform the experience. And so there's a lot of exciting things to think about. And I just thought through some things like this weekend, but if you look forward, think about payments, right? And how that's evolved, and our head of product and technology spent a bunch of time at Venmo, but I was away with some friends this weekend, another family, and it was so easy. We didn't even worry about things because at the end of the day, we just Venmo'd each other. And so I think that when you think about that, or you think about lending and how you can get loans in minutes now, where it used to take days, if not weeks or months to get loans, I think that there's a lot of change coming for the industry that's going to benefit the small business owner, and it's exciting to be part of it.
Brilliant. What's the way that you help your employees improve their well-being in the company?
Well, I think this is interesting. I think it gets back to really the engagement point, because I think that's really fundamental to it, which is I want everyone excited when they walk through the doors here, and I think that is really important. So I try to make sure that people are challenging themselves and always trying to improve, to get better, because I do think that is a core component to being happy and healthy. And so we want to make sure people understand that they can try things and they can make mistakes, and that learning is core to what we need to do. And I think that creates sort of, if you can do that in a way where you feel like you can be yourself, it creates what I call like very healthy stress. That's wanting to do something better. It's taking on a hard challenge, understanding that we're not trying to improve the process a little bit. We're trying to improve the process a lot. That to me is very positive and exciting, and that motivates people. On the same time, we want to make sure we're cutting out unhealthy stress, right? And unhealthy stress is where you worry about politics or things that are outside of your control. And we want to make sure that we don't let that creep into our environment. And then we want to make sure people have balance. I say a lot here that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And yes, there's times where we need to work hard, but we also need to make sure that people have the flexibility to design their days around their lives. And everybody's personal life is different. So, for example, for me, I tend to get in early, but I also try to leave so I can see my kids in the evening or most evenings. And so I want to make sure that I'm modeling that, and I want to make sure that people understand that they can sort of design their experience here around what they like doing outside the office. And then I think the last thing in well-being is there's a lot of nuts and bolts stuff that you just really need to do well. And so, you want to have a very comfortable, great, sort of environment, office space. Obviously, benefits are important, and we want people to use their insurance if they need it. We want people to take their vacation. And then lastly, I think we have a pretty cool tuition reimbursement program here where we want people just to learn things that will sort of improve them generally. So, if you're an engineer, you don't have to just take coding classes. If you want to take a sales class, go ahead, take a sales class. It's really more around just making sure that you're challenging yourself and learning about things that individually are interesting to you. So, I think you have to do all that as well as the other stuff.
Brilliant. And I think, I love that last point there, James, because I think sometimes that's often overlooked, where it's maybe a little bit focused on just their area of expertise rather than perhaps something else that they want to be involved in. You mentioned a little bit earlier about your father giving you that honesty trait, and thanks for sharing that. But is there something perhaps from your childhood that you could share with us that influenced your work ethic in later life?
I could. This one's not nearly as positive. It doesn't reflect as positively on me. So it's. I had a great childhood, but it's funny. I think a lot of the things that you remember really, really well are things that didn't go so well, or maybe when you were punished by your parents. This was not being punished, but I did play a lot of tennis growing up, and at an earlier age, like when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever, you play in a lot of tournaments, and basically I lost to someone I shouldn't have lost to. And it's safe to say I didn't handle that very well. We won't go into great details. But I think that at the end of it, I was really sort of disappointed with myself, because the way I acted was not the type of person I wanted to be. And it was certainly not the type of person that my parents wanted me to be. And so I think the lessons that I learned from that, and it was a really good experience because I learned a lot from it, was, it's easy to win when you have your best. And I had a lot of coaches throughout my career eventually say that to me. But great players know how to win when they don't have their A game. They can win with their B game or their C game. And I needed to learn from that to be able to do that, to kind of be the person you want to be your best self, whatever you want to call it, in good times and bad. And then I think the other thing that it really made me understand is you got to prepare for all possible outcomes. So I think too often you only prepare for the good outcomes. And clearly that match and that tournament, I hadn't prepared for the bad outcomes because I certainly didn't handle it well. So I think you have to be prepared for all possible outcomes, and I try to do that here, and I think that was a pretty good lesson, even though it took me a number of years to learn it.
Well, look, we're on the home run now, and we've got 2 more questions. What do you think your industry is going to look like in 5 years' time, if you can see that far ahead? And how do you think that'll impact your business model?
Yeah, so I think the honest answer is I don't know. But I think that it's going to look a lot different. And it gets back to sort of that excitement question. And I think the reason why it's going to look a lot different is, first, you have a lot of new people who are thinking about insurance. So, if you came and walked around Attune in our offices here, you're just going to see a ton of diversity. You're going to see people in shorts and flip-flops. You're going to see people, with long hair. You're going to see all sorts of things that you wouldn't have typically seen if you walked around an insurance company, 5 or 10 years ago. And, the fact that we're wearing shorts doesn't really make a difference. It's not important. But the thought process and what motivates us is probably different than what was motivating people in the insurance industry 5 or 10 years ago. So I think that's pretty exciting, and I think that focus on the customer that we're all bringing, I think you're going to see 3 things emerge. Exactly how they emerge, I wish I knew, because that would make me sleep better at night. But I think you're going to continue to see the product just get simpler. Today, it's still a really, really hard, complex product for a small business owner to understand. Our policies are still 70, 80 page long documents. They just don't need to be that it doesn't need to be that complex. So I think you're going to see simpler products emerge. But they still have to be insurance products, and they still have to make sure that you're respecting the fact that this needs to be a contract that small business owner can bank on when they need it. So it'll be simpler, but it still has to serve its purpose. I think the second thing you'll see is insurance will continue to get more customized. The question that I always ask is, today, why basically do a restaurant owner and a flower shop owner buy the same insurance policies? Now, they're a little bit different, but fundamentally they're the same insurance policies. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me, and I think you'll see that technology especially will enable you to be more customized in your approach. And then I think it's still going to become way more efficient. We're making some strides today, but there's still friction in the process, and I think ultimately, customers' demand and products, the way a customer and a product meet over time will always be through the simplest path. So I think you'll see that. I think you'll see sort of evolution there. And then, the last thing I'd say is I think that there's some things that you probably won't change. And so I think that brokers are still going to be around, and I think that they're still going to be providing advice to small business owners. I just think that the form in which they do that, the way in which they do that will change. So I think they need to embrace it, which I think a lot are. But I think that this is still a space where advice is a crucial part of the solution.
I'm looking forward, James, to your one-click, one-page mobile optimized insurance policy for the flower shop owner. So keep tuned for that. If as a final question, if you had your time again and you'd given your 20-year-old self advice, what's the one thing you'd look back and say to yourself?
I think the one thing I would say is just to take more risks when I was younger. I'm a pretty conservative, risk-averse person, which is weird to say given what I've ended up doing. But, I think early on in my career, I really followed the path that I thought I was supposed to be on. And I got on that path based on some great advice from a lot of people who cared about me. But I think I learned maybe earlier than 2007 when we started Buy Your Friend a Drink that I wanted to do something different, that I think I really wanted to build something, and I couldn't really articulate why, but I wish I probably would have tried to do something much riskier and off the beaten path earlier in my career.
James, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights. I love that today. If people want to reach out connect with you, find out more about Attune, what's the best way they can do that?
I think if they just want to get in touch with us, they can send us an email. It's hello@Attune, Attune, insurance.com. Or they could also visit our website, which is attuneinsurance.com. If you go to careers, you can see all the places we're hiring. We are definitely hiring, so please visit that. And then if there's any brokers out there, we are definitely open for business, and they can go to the register section on our website as well. Also, if anyone would like to connect personally, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Pretty standard stuff.
Fantastic. And I know you've got the a lovely avatar there. So did someone design that for you on your LinkedIn profile?
Oh, yeah, the avatar. That I will give the folks at Money 2020 props for that. That was where we got the idea back in my On Deck days. So thanks.
Fantastic. It's great. Money 2020, was it?
Yes.
Great job they did too. Well, look, great talking to you, James, and thanks so much for joining me, and good luck with your business.
Well, thanks, David. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.